Imagine if I asked you whether a life sacrificed to save another has a price, what would you say? And if I told you that this story doesn't begin with the New Testament, but was written thousands of years ago on the very first pages of human history, what then? Jesus' sacrifice was not a sudden event. It is the final yet deepest line of a long story. The first major scene of this story appears in Exodus chapter 12, when darkness, fear, and the shadow of death fell upon the land of Egypt. The Israelites were in slavery, and God decided that Pharaoh's hardness of heart would be answered by one last sign: the death of the firstborn. But God's character is not only justice, it is also mercy. So a way was given: a flawless lamb, whose blood was to be applied to the doorposts. Wherever the blood was seen, death would pass over. Here a fundamental principle emerges: the price is paid by one, the benefit received by another. This is substitution, the sacrifice in place of another. Think about it. The lamb was sacrificed, its bones were not broken, its blood saved lives, and all of this became a memorial night called Passover. It was not only the freedom of a nation, but also a prophetic shadow, the foretaste of the ultimate sacrifice to come. Time passes, sacrifices continue, blood in the temple, the death of animals, the burden of sin. But every sacrifice was incomplete because it only covered sin. It could not remove it. That is why Isaiah wrote centuries before: "He was wounded for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities." Here there is no lamb. There is a person, silent, innocent, bearing the sins of others on his shoulders. This is not mere poetry. This is a blueprint for the future. Return now to Passover. The lamb must be flawless, its blood visible outside, and through its death, life comes to the household. When we look toward Jesus, all these images converge in one person: guiltless, sacrificial. A blood given not just for one house, but to save all humanity from death. The Old Testament repeatedly asks this question: who will pay the price? Who can bring justice and mercy together in one place? The answer gradually unfolds. After Adam, an animal died for a covering of skins. Abraham was given a ram instead of his son. The Passover lamb was sacrificed. Prophets spoke of the coming servant. These stories are not separate. They are different chapters of the same story. And when we try to understand the sacrifice of Jesus, we are really seeing the answer to every Old Testament sacrifice, every drop of blood, every sigh, and every prayer. This sacrifice is not only a religious concept, it is a human story. Freedom from fear, release from sin, and life chosen over death. This is part one, where we have laid the foundation: shadow and substance, sign and reality. Now, let's move the story forward. Because if Passover told us that blood is needed to escape death, the Old Testament also asked, when and how will the burden of sin be fully borne? The entire Torah revolves around this question. In Leviticus, we see that sacrifice was not meant to be a one-night act, but a system. Daily blood, yearly sacrifices, every moment reminding that sin is not cheap. Here another deep principle emerges: life for a life. Blood is not just a sign of a wound, it is a symbol of life. Therefore, when blood is shed, life is truly being given. Now look at Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. 2 goats. One is sacrificed, the other lives and carries the sins of the people into the wilderness. This image cries out, will there ever be someone who can both be the sacrifice and also remove the sin? Now turn to the Psalms. David's pain does not seem to belong to him alone. They pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. They cast lots for my clothing. These words are not just the grief of a king, they sketch the suffering of another, suffering tied to sacrifice. Then comes Daniel, where a famous line appears. The Messiah will be killed, but not for himself. Think, if not for himself, then for whom? This question hung in the air for centuries. Then one of the last prophets, Zechariah, says, "They will look on the one they have pierced." Who is this pierced one who will be seen, and yet hope will arise? Now, when we tie all these threads together, a picture becomes clear. Sacrifice cannot remain only that of animals, because animals cannot bear the full weight of human sin. Human sin requires a human price, but an innocent human price. Here the Old Testament itself comes to a stop and lifts its eyes toward the future. And then, on the pages of the New Testament, a name emerges, Jesus, who says that he did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. His life was flawless like the Passover Lamb. His death bore the burden like the Yom Kippur goat. And his blood does not merely cover, but cleanses. This is not just theology. This is the height of human hope. If the Old Testament is a question, who? Then Jesus is the answer. If the chain of sacrifices is a restless cry, his sacrifice is the final, peaceful reply. This sacrifice is not only to please God, but to bring humanity home. And here, part 2 of the journey pauses, where we see that sacrifice does not only mean death, but a new relationship, a new identity, and a new life. Now the story reaches the point where many think it is all over. The body that bore the burden of sacrifice was laid in the tomb. Stone was set, seal was placed, and it seemed as though death had won. But the Old Testament never says that the tomb is the final word. In fact, the tomb is only a pause, a silent moment before God's answer. From here, we understand that Jesus' sacrifice does not stop at death, but would be incomplete without the resurrection. And this too was written long before. In the Psalms we hear the words, "You will not abandon my soul to the grave, nor let your Holy One see decay." David spoke this for himself, but history shows that these words fit another beyond him. The decay of the tomb, the perishing of the body, these were denied to someone else. Then an unusual turn appears in Isaiah 53. After being sacrificed, it is written, "He shall see his offspring and prolong his days." Think, how can one who has died see his offspring? Here is a hint of life after death. Now recall the story of the prophet Jonah. 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish, then alive again on land. This was not just a miracle, it was a sign, a picture of returning from the depths of the grave. Similarly, the words of Hosea echo, "After 2 days he will revive us. On the 3rd day he will raise us up." Here the Old Testament speaks both collectively and personally, of a nation and of the one individual who embodies that nation. Now understand a deeper link between sacrifice and resurrection. According to Leviticus, the first yield of the harvest, first fruits, was offered to God, a sign of assurance that the full harvest was coming. When Jesus rose from the tomb, it was not just the return of one person. He was the first fruits, a sign that the sequence of death had been broken and life was promised to all connected to him. Here, the sacrifice reaches its culmination. Justice fully satisfied, mercy alive, and life victorious over death. The resurrection proves that the sacrifice was accepted, that the blood was not wasted, that the tomb was only a passage, not the destination. And when we see Jesus alive, Jesus, all the questions of the Old Testament fall silent one by one. Adam's lost life is restored. Abraham's withheld promise finds its full meaning. The Passover Lamb now gives not just escape from death, but life. The burden of Yom Kippur is lifted forever. This is not merely an event. This is a new era, where humanity is not only forgiven, but recreated. Without the resurrection, the sacrifice would be just a tragic story. But with the resurrection, it becomes good news. It is the proclamation that God has called humanity back, deemed it worthy of life. And here, part 3 pauses, breathing in this certainty. The tomb is empty, and the story is still unfolding. In the next section, we will see how this sacrifice and resurrection practically transform the life of modern humans, faith, identity, and the pain of everyday life. Now, the question is no longer whether the sacrifice and resurrection happened. The question is this: if all of this is true, then what does it mean for your life and mine? Because the Bible never confines theology to the mind alone. It always reaches the heart, the conscience, and everyday life. The Old Testament also ends at this point: a promise, a waiting, and a hope that is not only for the future, but also for the present. The prophet Jeremiah wrote that God would make a new covenant, one not written on stone tablets, but on hearts. Meaning the law would transform from within, not merely command from the outside. Now think, if Jesus' sacrifice and resurrection resolved the problem of sin, then the new covenant is not just a religious agreement, but a living relationship. In the Old Testament, sin always created a gap between God and humanity, between humans and within oneself. That is why, from Eden to the Israelites, the story repeatedly shows humans hiding, out of fear, out of shame. But when we understand Jesus' sacrifice and his return to life, the first practical change is that the foundation of fear is shaken. In Genesis, God's first question was, "Where are you?" And now, after the resurrection, this question is no longer accusation, but invitation. Humanity can return, not hide, and live. The second practical change is identity. In the Old Testament, identity was mostly tied to lineage, law, and signs, special people, special land, special clothing. But the prophets hinted that one day nations would be included, and hearts of stone would become hearts of flesh. When Jesus rises alive after the sacrifice, identity changes. Humans are no longer defined by their sin, their brokenness, or weakness, but by the sacrifice given for them. This is not just forgiveness, it is restoration of dignity. In the Old Testament, after a sacrifice, a person was considered clean for a time. Now, after the sacrifice, the person is called new. The third change relates to the pain of daily life. The Bible never promises that suffering ends after faith. The Psalms cry out with pain. Job's suffering is part of the Old Testament story, but the resurrection gives it a new meaning. Pain is not meaningless. If death is not the final word, then neither is suffering. That is why the prophet Isaiah said that he will bear our griefs. This does not mean grief will not come, but that grief will not remain alone. Jesus' resurrection assures that God is present even beyond the pain. The fourth, and very deep, change is purpose. In the Old Testament, the nation's purpose was to bear witness to God, so that nations may see and know. But the nation itself broke. Now, when one person accomplished through sacrifice and resurrection what the nation could not, those connected to him received the same purpose, to become a living testimony. Life is no longer just about survival, but becomes a means of reflecting mercy, justice, and truth. Here we see that the chain from Old Testament to New Testament is not just a chain of stories, but a chain of life. Forgiveness through sacrifice, hope through resurrection, and together they create a new humanity. Jesus is no longer only a historical figure. He becomes a living center, around whom humans understand their identity, their pain, and their future anew. Part 4 pauses here, with the question that does not only listen, but asks every person, if the sacrifice has forgiven you, and the resurrection has given you the right to live, then how do you intend to live your life? And in the next and final sections, we will see this story come full circle through worship, ethics, and life in today's world. Now we close the full circle of this profound story, a journey that began in Exodus chapter 12, carried through Jesus' sacrifice and resurrection, and extends into the life of humanity today. Consider the beginning: slavery in Egypt, the shadow of death, and the blood of a lamb that saves life. This Passover was not just a historical event, it was a shadow, a sign pointing toward the ultimate sacrifice of the future. The Old Testament showed that human sin is not only individual, but also creates communal and spiritual separation. The sequence of sacrifices, an animal for Adam, a ram for Abraham, the lamb for the Israelites, everywhere maintains a principle: substitution, mercy, and justice. It is not enough to merely shed blood. The sacrifice must be accompanied by intention, symbol, and promise. Then came the time of the Psalms and the prophets. The words of Isaiah and Zechariah, written centuries before, were preparing us for Jesus, the flawless, silent one who would bear the sins of his people. This is the link that connects the Old Testament and the New Testament, prophecy and fulfillment. Jesus' sacrifice is not merely a religious ritual, but the full answer to logic and the human heart. When we reach Jesus' tomb and resurrection, it becomes clear that the tomb was only a temporary stage. The Psalms had already declared that God would not abandon his Holy One to the grave, and Jesus' resurrection demonstrated that. The chain of death was broken, the promise of life fulfilled, and the purpose of the sacrifice, to bear the burden of sin, was completed. The Old Testament's first fruits, the Yom Kippur goat, and the Passover Lamb, all reach their fulfillment in Jesus. In Part 4, we saw that this is not only a journey of theology, but also a framework for human everyday life. Confronting fear, reclaiming identity, giving meaning to suffering, and understanding purpose. These are no longer just concepts, but lived experience. Resurrection means that we can stand beyond fear, see our brokenness as part of our identity, and choose the path of mercy and justice through every grief. Now let us summarize this journey. Beginning, Exodus 12, Passover, the flawless lamb, and blood that saves life. Old Testament sequence, substitution, sacrificial system, the concept of bearing sin, and prophetic shadow. Leviticus, Psalms, Daniel, Zechariah. Fulfillment, Jesus, flawless, sacrificial, sin-bearing, and triumphant over death through resurrection. Practical impact, elimination of fear, reclaiming identity, giving meaning to suffering, and discovering purpose. The deepest lesson of this sequence is that sacrifice does not merely forgive, but also gives the right to live anew. And the resurrection reminds us that death and the grave can never be the final word. Today, we can bring this story into our lives. Do not isolate any pain. Beyond it, there is hope. Face every brokenness with identity, knowing that you can be a new person. Prioritize mercy, justice, and truth in every decision of life. And most importantly, view your life through the lens of the promise of sacrifice and resurrection. Every moment is a new beginning, Every night is followed by morning. This entire journey shows us that the mission of the Bible is not only teaching, but a continuous process of experience and transformation. From the Old Testament to the New Testament, from Passover to resurrection, from sin to life. This is a continuous thread that reconciles us not only with God, but also with ourselves. And thus, the message of sacrifice and resurrection is still alive today, in our lives, in every heart, for all time.